All right. Well, I guess we'll just go ahead and have you get started. You can just give your names and so forth for the record.
Great. Josh Chandler, Director of Intergovernmental Relations at the Vermont League of Cities and Towns.
And my name is Samantha Sheehan, the Municipal Policy and Advocacy Specialist, also for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns.
So thanks for having us back. Thanks for hearing from so many interested groups. It's good, I think, that we all sort of hear from each other and work together on this. Just level setting again, that VLCT represents all 251 municipalities. Their members by choice value our services, our resources, our advocacy that we provide them regardless of their size, urban, rural. Most of our members, 73%, have populations below 2,500 and include many farm communities. Again, we appreciate the work that the Agriculture, Markets and Foods has done to try and reach consensus with municipalities on these issues. We also appreciate those discussions with the farm groups. We each have real interests at stake regarding the outcome of this bill or the Senate version. And, I really truly believe we're each acting in good faith to try to reach consensus and compromise on our positions. We really want to talk to you today a little bit about where your bill's going and talk about some ways that maybe can strengthen your interests as we think that would be acceptable to municipalities, and then raise a couple of critical concerns we have in one of the areas. I think what is sort of different about municipalities' concerns with this is we're not really concerned with whether a farm, even in a dense area, is making $0 or $100,000 or $1,000, whether it's on 1 acre or 1,000 acres. The whole point is we're not really trying to regulate farming at all. What we need to do is have the ability to apply consistent land use regulations to all businesses and property owners living in dense areas. So to avoid the concerns that these favored areas for growth and development that the state has decided, this is where we're putting money, this is where we're removing Act 250 land use regulations, can be fairly managed. Because if it's not us, who is it? It's not the state. Is it going to be the Agency of Agriculture managing 1/10 of an acre lot, determining agriculture or municipal zoning applies? Someone's got to call the balls and strikes. Otherwise, the courts will be deciding all of these issues all the time. And we think that's chaos. So we support the right to grow food. We support certain elements that you have in this bill, but we have some serious concerns about adding all livestock into this. And Samantha will get into the details. But the reality is, if these aren't regulated farms because they're sub-jurisdictional from RAPS, municipalities have been regulating backyard livestock for centuries, literally centuries. Municipal ordinances do that for the safety of the animals, for the safety of the people, the neighbors, viruses, diseases, well contamination. And literally every municipality in the state allows backyard chickens. Some of them don't allow emus or ostriches because if they escape, there's a problem. And so we think going down this road is searching for a problem that doesn't exist. It could create a lot more concerns that I think you'll be confronted with deciding from other groups. Even in the city of Essex Junction, Taft Corners, they allow hens, 6 hens and other animals in the backyard. So I'll sort of stop there, and Samantha will present a couple areas where we think we can strengthen your intent, talk about that, and maybe give you a little bit more flavor for the livestock regulation not being included in that right to grow food exemption from all municipal regulation, because it's already being regulated and has been for centuries in Vermont.
So I think I'll start and say a little bit more about the livestock provision and how this works now in communities across the state, and works quite well in order to allow for the care and keeping of animals of all shapes and sizes, but in a way that's like safe and appropriate, and doesn't cause undue impacts in a neighborhood. So as long as people have lived in Vermont, they have lived here with animals. And for all that time, that municipal governments have been organized, they have had the ability to regulate and enforce local laws pertaining to animal welfare and, the care and keeping of animals. So if you have a dog and you've licensed that dog, you did that at town hall. And you probably showed the age and the veterinary records and described what the dog looks like. And, you know, if you take your dog out to walk on bike paths or in Hubbard Park, your dog is on a leash. That's because of the municipal regulations of the city of Montpelier. And most places that have animal ordinance and really any sort of density, residential density, have some type of animal ordinance that applies to large animals and livestock animals. And so in Essex, to use Essex, for example, you can actually keep any livestock. There are rules about they have a significant setback requirement from the neighbor's property line. And then they also have requirements to do with the disposal of manure. In Burlington, you can keep chickens. There are a lot of chickens that live in backyards in Burlington. And there's a minimum square foot per chicken requirement on the coop. And the only other rule is they have to be put up at night. So these are reasonable regulations, that people, you know, some families, some properties that are not farms have worked under these rules for generations. And it goes really well. One thing I said when we discussed this in the Senate is imagine going to town hall and trying to prove if you plan to eat your animal or not. Like you can't. Or like, and also we don't care. We care how is the animal kept, where, how are you managing the waste? How many of them are there? If you plan to have 3 pigs for the natural life of those pigs, that's great. And if you plan to have a pig for a season and harvest it in the fall, that's also great. It's not about whether or not the animal is intended for food. You still have the ability to have them and to keep them well. Why this is really important is because most of the enforcement against animal abuse and crimes against animals is local enforcement. Not in all cases. Some really complex and severe cases, of course, will be managed by multiple agencies, including Vermont State Police. But even when a sheriff goes and sort of serves orders and is involved in the forfeiture of an animal, usually what they're enforcing is a local law of that town that creates that opportunity to intervene and to bring the animal into a situation where it's being better cared for. So not only do we really care because this would upset decades and decades of existing municipal authority, but it would also complicate a number of state laws that pertain to the enforcement of these types of situations when animals are being abused or poorly kept or hoarded. So that's what we sort of had prepared to say about that. Is there any questions any sort of particular concerns about that?
Any questions about the history of what's actually happening in municipal? I mean, there's 251 towns, each have their own rules and regulations. I think you said that there's no municipality that currently prohibits
Hens.
hens.
Correct.
Could Montpelier decide tomorrow that you have to go through the process that you could not have hens?
I mean, under the law,
Under the law, yeah.
I'd like to see them try. The reason why this is the norm is because it's part of the culture. It's the way people feed themselves. It's a neighborly experience. Folks generally like hens and they work well. But there are places where you can have any type of laying fowl. There are places where you can have certain smaller birds, like they might enumerate turkey, geese, duck, chickens. Lots of places. I know like roosters are controversial. Lots of municipal ordinance allows roosters. So I think like you were talking yesterday about there are some places that are really well suited to having a number of pigs or a small mix of animals as part of a homestead. And that's clearly true. I mean, that's the way Vermonters have been living for a long time. And part of why that works is because when it goes awry, a municipality has an enforcement tool.
Since emus have come up a couple of times.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about all the different species that somebody might have, and I don't imagine that every town has singled them out directly. How does that work?
Yeah, so some like, so Essex, Essex, wow, what's the possessive form of Essex? The ordinance in Essex is quite simple. Like it's much more on the lines of you can have livestock such as, like including horses, cattle, swine, I think goat is in there, but it's not comprehensive. So that's like an inclusive version where they say you can have livestock such as these animals as long as you follow these rules enumerated. Other municipalities like Burlington do the opposite, where they say these are the specific animals you may not keep in a residential district. And I love that one because it's literally rooster, cattle, swine, emu, camel. And maybe someday when I retire, I will find in the Vermont State Archives what happened with the emu and the camel that led to that legislative change in Burlington. But so it's done both ways. Like sometimes it's just like, you can have animals as long as you have fences, as long as you have a safe enclosure with clean bedding, as long as the manure isn't near yours or a neighbor's well. Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it does exclude commonly cattle and swine.
Or is that Dustin?
Is it specifically camel or is it camelage?
It's camel,
So you can
Camel
have
one.
alpaca or
correct?
llama.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Currently?
Yeah, currently. Yeah.
Back on it and go
And
downtown.
so as it stands right now, state law and municipal law, under state law and municipal law, a town can outright say you can't have camels or fill in the blank.
Yep.
It could also say you can have camels or fill in the blank under these circumstances.
Correct. Yep. And that's what they look like.
And each town has its own.
Yeah,
set of-
some of them look kind of like the wraps where it's like you can have 5 horse, you can have 6 pigs, you can have 25 chickens. Some of them are done that way. Some of them, the thing is to like not to jump into criticizing the Agency of Agriculture's request, but in the 1 acre, 1 to 4, like in the management of acreage, the way local zoning laws typically apply for all sorts of things, like can you build an ADU? Can you put a pool in your backyard? Can you have a chicken coop? It is both the land area and the shape. So where are the setbacks from your neighbors and the public infrastructure? Many folks have these like dog ear shaped parcels, they call them. So short frontage, large back 40, it's very suitable to the good management of animals as pets, including really large animals. So a lot of times the way it looks at the municipal level is not, you can have 25 chickens, but no roosters. It's more like you can keep animals as long as you have the space and the setback and the land area to manage or to prevent well contamination, potable water contamination.
And
Yeah.
so the towns are able to figure that out too on a case by case basis, whether
Yeah.
there's enough land or.
And a lot like it's really like if there's a complaint, someone goes out and looks, usually a zoning administrator, and maybe with a select board chair, and they agree that, oh no, this person's following the rules. You might not like the way the animals sound or smell, but if they're following, if the coop is the right square footage, if the manure pile is visible and we see it's 1,000 feet from the wellhead, then there's nothing to do here. But unfortunately, it is just true. It happens almost every year. Sometimes there are complaints, a local official goes out and enforcement action is necessary. And it's typically for the safety of the animal.
for example, I live in Randolph. I'm on the planning commission. We do not have an animal ordinance, but we've been requested from a group of neighbors for more than a year to establish an ordinance because of a particular property that has 2 or 3 pigs, raises a number of turkeys, has year-round chickens in a tight residential area on a third of an acre. And the neighbors have repeatedly asked for that. But so far, the select board, it hasn't risen to their concern to establish an ordinance yet. Maybe it will at some point, and they might say on a third of an acre, you can't raise 2 pigs, but that's not the case yet.
So, and as you were, I think, suggesting earlier in Montpelier, probably be difficult to get the political support for a ban on.
I mean.
Yeah, I don't think chickens, I just don't think that would happen.
It's
but
not
it would be a
tenable.
public process for those members that are elected to those positions to make that decision. And, you know, you would
Yeah.
hope they'd be representing the greater will of their public would suggest that's not a good idea.
I don't know if folks here worked on the compost law.
For all of our,
Oh, was it?
in this committee anyway, yeah.
Well, did you work on it, Fran, the compost law? Caroline did, okay. So the compost law passed, and I guess in the first version as enacted, it prohibited or somehow got in the way of selling eggs from chickens fed compost. And I thought like my town was gonna burn. I've never seen an issue like this. We closed the school with less drama. Like, and I'm not being dramatic, like that town meeting year, it was 2016. Our representatives, it was Representative Conlon at the time and Senator Hardy and Senator Bray. Like they heard what for over the compost law. And I was a relatively new resident of town, saying like, I had no idea this many people had chickens or compost, but you know, it's a part of, it's a part of life here.
Or go ahead, Representative.
So in the case that has triggered all this conversation in the first place, I'm guessing that I'm curious to know what the bylaws were in Essex.
Essex,
Town of Essex.
Essex City.
Or the bylaws.
It's now the city of Essex,
Specifically the bylaws that weren't in place. That I'm guessing weren't in place in order to be able to address this process so that it went to court instead. Is that why did it go to court in the first place?
It was
If
determined
wasn't
to be a farm. So then the municipality couldn't enforce its ordinances, which have they allow poultry, waterfowl, you know, but they have certain setback requirements and amounts, but because it was considered a farm determined by the Agency of Agriculture, then the municipality couldn't enforce that. And it was the neighbors that brought suit of complaints. And so this is, I think, perfect segue into one, we want to codify in a stronger place in the law, the right to grow food.
Mhm.
The municipality shall not have the right to functionally prohibit people from growing food, as you've defined it, but removing the livestock, because that, as we've described, would be a considerable upending of centuries law in Vermont that is here for more than just growing animals, but safety, animal cruelty prevention, and so that's what we've been talking about so far. And we can show you where that is, I think, in the existing structure of municipal law, zoning bylaw law under VSA 24, and then talk about tier 1 areas as you've defined, with some exemptions for existing agriculture practices that may be in those areas when they become established, if a town decides to pursue it and then decides to regulate agriculture, that I think sort of mirrors some of your thinking.
So,
I'm sorry, just want to be,
yeah,
and I will just be quick, but I just want to be sure that Representative Byrd got the answer to the question, because it was, I think, important to know that Essex does have strong bylaws And everybody thought that it didn't matter because they were farming under the wraps because they had more than $2,000 in sale of duck eggs. And when the court said, actually, no, you're not a farm, we're reading the statute differently, then the bylaws kicked in.
So this is the bylaw for Essex. And again, this is not for properties which are not a farm. This is what a bylaw looks like. So it'll have enumerated sections. It looks a lot like a state law. And so you can see at the top here, it says for these agricultural uses, including horses, cattle, hogs, sheep, goats, poultry, except with the exception of uses exempted by the wraps. So their bylaw is saying, if you keep all these animals, that's okay. And if you're not subject to the wraps, then these things are true. And then these sections describe how big and how far apart buildings should be based off of the zoning district. So I'm not familiar with these zoning districts, but presumably these are high density residential zoning districts. And then they say they have a separate set of rules for feedlots, runs, pens, etc. There are other standards related to the management of manure and soils, some that are particular to chickens. So this is a well-developed local package of regulation that is quite inclusive of all sorts of animals. It doesn't say what kind you can or can't have, but it is quite specific based off of where you live in the community of Essex and what type of lot size and shape you have and what existing structures are there, how those animals should be kept. And so this is their example. So this is what a bylaw looks like. And now I want to talk about our suggestions for your bill, which would go, oh wait, I think I have to switch my screen share. I'm a person that keeps a lot of tabs up. Okay. So here is your bill that was posted yesterday. And you can see that where it makes changes to what's allowed in municipal bylaw is in section D1 of 4413. And that is the old place where in existing law, it discusses wraps and farm structures. When it comes to the right to grow food, which I want to make sure we're really clear about that. When it comes to plants, orchards, and maple, like we asked for this protection in law, we support it. And we don't care at all if someone's selling eggs or apples for a couple bucks here or making a trade for some other food or service. If they have a short-term rental like an Airbnb and they stock it with blueberries from their blueberry bushes, that's great. We don't care if it's a paying customer, a house guest, a family member, or a neighbor. So we actually suggest, we think, a strengthening change that would make that an even stronger protection of the right to grow food in the law, which is to move it up a section out of the farm regs and into this 4413. So 4413A1, these are some of the oldest and most significant preemptions to municipal regulation for bylaw. And they include state-owned buildings, schools, churches and places of worship, hospitals, transfer stations, that's what a solid waste management facility is, hazardous waste management, and several newer ones of the past couple of years that pertain to homeless shelters. And so what we want to do is basically add ABCDEFGHI. We want to add an I that is, and the right to grow food, including plants, orchards, and maple from your bill, period. No like for the homeowner or family or non-paying we're just like, you can grow food. But what it would do by putting it here is say, everyone can do it, whether they're a renter, a homeowner, whether they occupy that land as a resident or not. Like, I know folks who live in apartments or very small places on Main Street, and they own large parcels of land elsewhere where they grow a lot of food. So you don't have to live in the place where you're growing the food. Which we think is an improvement, but it would also say that the municipality could regulate some stuff. So maybe you can have apple trees, but not over the sidewalk. Where they will fall and get in the way of pedestrians. You can have them in the backyard, or it may say, your raspberry hedge is tearing down your neighbor's fence. It's time to move it back and stay within the setback of your property. So they would have to allow the food to be grown, but they could make sure that it's not impacting in a negative way public rights of way and public property or other private property nearby.
Representative Nelson.
So this would work well for sites like community gardens.
Yeah, often community gardens are owned by the municipality or on public lands already. There are many that are not, like, of course, like in different types of housing
Church
communities or the church.
Or school.
Affordable housing projects often build
Yeah.
gardens in the back or.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. So if a church, so unlike the draft language you looked at yesterday, if a church or a synagogue or a youth center wanted to have a community garden or a small orchard, this would protect their right to do that. So we're not just talking about residents or renters, homeowners or renters.
And this wouldn't preclude a landlord from writing a contract with a
Right.
renter saying you can't do.
Exactly, yeah, the renter landlord law would be another series where the landlord could say, actually, we don't want you growing this, that's in our contract. This wouldn't prevent the property owner from determining its use of the property.
Yeah.
If the property owner allows it, the municipality has to also allow it.
So the lease could say you can have dogs, but not pigs. Or you could have a garden planted in the existing garden bed, but not beyond the existing garden bed. I've had a couple leases like that myself. That would still be allowed. Yeah.
Representative Burke.
The nature of the list is one of structures.
Yeah.
What do you think about the fact that, growing food is really an activity? I mean, it involves physical things, obviously.
You could have a greenhouse, could be a structure.
There,
Oh, they're definitely structures involved.
yeah.
But
There's a lot of activity that happens at schools and hospitals and churches,
yes.
including like parking, the movement of people in and out, playgrounds and play structures, public events and public event permitting, church bells, big, loud, noisy things. Right? So it's inclusive of all of those types of regulations that, so the municipality again can regulate only to the extent that the regulation does not have the effect of interfering with the intended functional use. So Randolph, where Gifford Hospital is, could say, you have to have your ambulance bay on the back or the south end of the building, away from the daycare that exists to the north end of the building. And that would be allowed, but they cannot say, we don't like ambulances, they're loud, they're fast, and they might, run someone over. Because it's a hospital, the hospital has to have ambulances to function for its intended use. This comes up in homeless shelters because there were cases where a municipality basically permitted the structure of the homeless shelter, but then attached permit conditions that made it impossible to be used as a homeless shelter. So like hours of operation, where the entrances could be and if they could be locked or unlocked, things like that. And so adding that to this type of preemption of bylaw made it so that a municipality cannot do that. They can't say you can build a homeless shelter, but people can only go in and out from 7 to 8 AM.
Literally,
doesn't
when
work.
this, emergency shelter, this was added, there's been 3 new shelters in Vermont. In
Yeah.
those communities, the folks trying to put a shelter have been working on it for 10 years. But the municipal bylaws and the way they were designing it was essentially functionally making it impossible to do it, even though
Yeah.
technically they were allowed. So the only way they could change that was by putting it in this section of a municipal law that says you cannot not allow this. And that's why we think having the right to grow food is important here. I get the question because it says structure,
Mhm.
how that would be, maybe some general, your ledge counsel, our attorney can have that discussion and make sure that there isn't another tweak somewhere in that language to structure an operation or something that would
Yeah.
make sure that works.
This would allow, for example, like if someone was using lights in their greenhouse, one of the things that could be required is screening. So they can't stop the grow lights or the greenhouse because that's for the purpose of growing food. But they can say, will you plant a hedgerow or will you raise the height of the fence? The lights aren't shining into the bedroom 10 feet away or whatever. So that would be the impact, but this is a strong protection. Like this is where the right to do something goes in Title 24.
So using that example, we're thinking here about small homeowners, but not just homeowners, as you've said. But using that example of the greenhouse, would putting this language in here also protect a farmer with a greenhouse in the same way?
So that's a great question. So on that's a choice. It's a policy choice. So right now, what your draft bill does is, and to be honest, it's a choice we're kind of agnostic to in how you facilitate it through the legislation. As we've said, our concern is like clear objective standards that are fairly applied in the densest mixed use areas. So that is like traffic, how traffic flows in and out and onto public roads and across sidewalks and crosswalks. It's the form and density of buildings and setbacks so that fire suppression and emergency services and other types of public services and utilities can reach properties on all sides of a property line. Like these are the things we're worried about. We do not want to get into like the intensity of cultivation or soil quality on a vegetable farm. That is a regulation of agriculture, which should be done best by the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, not by a municipal zoning department. So right now, what you've done is you've put this section here, B, which is farther down, and it basically says a municipality through its bylaw shall not regulate farm structures on wrap farms, except farm structures in Tier 1A, created through Act 181. But so that it says a municipality shall not regulate farm structures on a designated farm. They can regulate farm structures on a designated farm in 1A, except for farms that existed before or the structure was built before this summer. We agree. We have testified and believe that very few, if any, existing operating farms will become inside of this initial mapping of Tier 1A areas. And on the chance that 1 or 2 or 3 existing farms does end up inside Rutland's Tier 1A or St. Albans City's Tier 1A, we agree they shouldn't face sort of retroactive new regulation that they didn't plan for when they created their farm. So we'd also like to make a suggestion about how to strengthen that protection for existing farm structures. But sorry, back to your question, Mr. Chair, which is you've done that here, which kind of works. but is also complex because there's stuff we care about, like how trucks move in and out of main roads, including state highways and main streets, that is not encompassed by sticking to farm structure under the current definition of farm structure. We don't really care to open up the definition of farm structure either, which would mean maybe having to think really hard, what are important, reasonable things to add here if you leave it in this section. However, you have a choice. It's totally a policy choice that should be discussed, but you can move it up to where you can move it up here to where hospitals, churches, town dumps, and homeless shelters are. And you could say, the following uses may be regulated. So the municipality may regulate this specific list of things: size, density, setback, parking, lighting, noise, landscaping, screening, etc. And you could put farms under wrap in tier 1A here. And so this would allow a municipality to say, we have to be able to see through your fence because that allows oncoming traffic to see each other. So you can have a fence because you're a farm and you need a fence, but we need the fence to look like this so that it doesn't cause car accidents. And again, this is like, think about visiting a hospital. You were able to get there. There was probably a stoplight, a bus stop, a crosswalk, not a lot of snow or ice that you had to navigate to get into the building. There were linen trucks and refrigerated food trucks and medical supply trucks coming in and out. You probably didn't see them or hear them. There were ambulances moving 24/7. That all works because of the planning and the participation of the municipality in the hospital. But the municipality cannot get in the way of the hospital operating. It can't say you have to close in the middle of the night. You can't have outdoor lights. You can't have a parking garage. You can't have an ambulance bay. The things that are necessary to operate a hospital have to be allowed. But the things that impact the properties and the public infrastructure around it, such as signage and crosswalks and where you pull in and where you pull out and whether that should be a one-way or a four-way, those are the things that the municipality can influence in its regulation against a hospital.
We're limiting our talk right down to tier 1A. We haven't dwelled into
Great question.
1B because that's where there's more commercial farm operations in the creation of tier 1B, and I might live it, so.
It's a great question because tier 1A doesn't exist anywhere in the state right now. We're not sure if there'll be more than a couple. But in order to be tier 1A, you have to be tier 1B first. Tier 1B is what is being mapped today and is what, for example, the city of Essex Junction is today and probably will always be. And so the reality is that unless there's some other measures added, the tier 1B that is the city of Essex Junction and the problem that created this will continue, and you'll have many more of those. Because they will be the biggest communities in Vermont for several years, and a few of them will advance to tier 1A. So we're not really addressing the problem and the problems that will arise from lawsuits unless we have some other measure like adding 1B to that or having the wraps that reduce the acreage size down to 1. We have testified in other groups that opening the wraps may have some concerns, but if you choose to approach, and as Samantha said, this is a policy choice, how to address this, and you only leave 1A, that will not fix the problems that have got us to this point, and we'll have to have another trigger, such as acre size, that removes some of those problems because they're not regulated as a farm by the Agency of Agriculture in order to not go backwards from where we've been and create more farms. So that was going to be our next segue.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
we
also-
understand where you're at, but this is the reality.
It's also, this might sound like a trick, but it's truly not a trick. as I explained the first time we testified, this mapping process that creates an eligible area for 1A or 1B is quite long. It's done by the RPC, not the town. And it is authorized and approved and gone through by the LURB. And they do look at the current way the land is being used that's being proposed to be in the tier 1 eligible area or in the tier 2 area.
Great example we looked at the other day is South Burlington. You
Yeah,
know, Bread and Butter Farm, we've heard that. Bread and Butter Farm on their map is mapped out of any potential
Yeah.
tier 1 or 1B area.
yeah.
Even
But
though it's in
the,
the city of South Burlington.
but the South Burlington TIF district mapped in to 1B, tier 1, right? So that existing farm is known and is accommodated for to the best of the RPC and the state and the town's ability now. And so that's why we said, we're okay with this going backwards clause to protect existing buildings, is almost definitely a current operating dairy will not end up in a tier 1 area this year. So this is why I say this sounds like a trick, but I swear it's not. What could happen is a new future farm after basically January 2027 could think, so if you pass a version of this law you're looking at that says 1A buildings, farm buildings in 1A can be regulated, but not 1B. What could happen is a new future beginning farmer could acquire property in an existing 1B community like Essex, like Waterbury, like Richmond, like Fairleigh, like lots of many places in Vermont. And they're like, all right, 1B, I only have to look at the Agency of Ag regulations. I don't have to look at the municipal regs because I'm exempt from those. And then at any point, that municipality could meet the 1A standard and apply for it. And that farm could get rolled up into 1A. So the 1A application can happen anytime. The regional 1B mapping happens every 8 years through this big community process. But like South Burlington will have its 1B eligible area, which works to not include any existing farms today. It'll get 1B status probably within the next 6 months. And then it might say 8 months from now, 2 years from now, well, we don't really want all this to be 1A, but we want the TIF district to be 1A. So then they apply for that and it gets approved. But then maybe 5 years from now, they say, actually, now we're ready. We want the whole 1B to go to 1A. And that change could happen. So with what we're asking for, which again is not to regulate agricultural practices, but to be able to apply fair land use law that is clear, easy to understand, and not vulnerable or ripe for legal challenge in the courts, but to allow farming and protect the right to farm and the right to grow food at the same time. If you only provide municipal authority in 1A, it could complicate life several years out from now for a farmer acquiring land, leasing land, expanding their farm enterprise in a 1B. As well as it would not resolve the Essex issue specifically.
And it may not be practical in every case or any case, but anything that's that's eligible for tier 1 today, starting out with tier 1B, any of that could be tier 1A. I mean, facts on the ground might make it hard to do that, but
So the thing that 1A and 1B have in common as a statutory criteria is zoning and a municipal plan, floodplain bylaw, water and sewer or suitable soil to add sewer or septic. And that's basically 1B, along with some controversial opinions, we think, from the LURB, like, is there a church or it shouldn't include a mobile home park? But that's what the law says in Act 181. And then the statutory criteria for 1A are much more about the capacity of the municipality. So it's like, do you have bonding capacity? Do you have capital planning? Do you have sufficient technical staff and planning and
Do you
zoning
have,
staff?
do you have endangered species regulations?
Yeah.
It ups the ante to be less about, oh, okay, in this area, you've got water and sewer and you've got zoning and bylaws. But in addition to that, do you have all these other things that cover all of Act 250, basically?
So a community like Essex or like
'Cause then
Waterbury,
it removes all Act 250 because you
Yeah.
already regulate all that. So why do you have to go through a permit and have everyone else sign off? Because you've thought about all those things in that area. And so that's why like the tier 1A list is going to be very small at first.
it's gonna be like the current TIFs.
Yeah.
But I guess what I just want to make sure everyone understands is a lot of communities that are regional centers, like Newport, the RPC will say, we see you have some public utility service. We see you have zoning and bylaw. They actually have form-based code, which is a very high level. We see this part of Newport,
City of Newport.
City of
not
Newport.
town, city.
yeah, this part of the city of Newport has density existing and apartment buildings and houses and coffee shops. We say this is 1B. So the RPC says, we say this is 1B. The LURB approves it. Then in time, as time moves forward, the city of Newport could work towards those other criteria. Now we want to write a capital plan. Now we want to get our finances order and get a capital bond. Now we want to grow the staff in our permitting office, so we have a stronger regulatory arm locally. And then at a certain point, again, a year from now, 12 years from now, they could say, we're ready for 1A. We want to release ourselves and our local homeowners and developers from Act 250. We're going to go for 1A.
It happens in reverse too. In
Yes.
Chittenden County, the city of Essex is in for 1B. They're opting in. The town of Essex is not opting for 1B at all. Either is the town of Colchester.
Yeah.
So they're not even going to have a chance to regulate agriculture under what we're proposing at all.
It's about an 85% opt-in rate right now.
So I think we're getting the point here
Mhm.
that 1A could appear somewhere down the road and then what?
Right.
So do you have a suggestion that, or a recommendation or a preference for how we?
We think you should just say tier 1.
Yeah, or we should say 1A or 1B because tier 1A doesn't like exist in the law. I bet Ledge Council would agree. But we think it should be both. And again, like the initial mapping is very unlikely to include operating farms. If it does, we agree. Their structures should be exempt them. This is like no new surprises for the current farms. And we're suggesting this, I can share my screen again. We're suggesting moving this up out of where the ag language is now and where we talk about RAPs and up into this stronger, more limiting type of bylaw. So it's not anything a farm does, the town could regulate in tier 1A or 1B. It's just these specific things that really apply, like traffic, lighting, setbacks. This is stuff we've been communicating to you. Our members care most about being able to make sure works in these areas that have water and sewer, have crosswalks, have churches, have schools, have businesses and apartment buildings, and may have a farm in the future. We just want to make sure it all works together.
I appreciate your point, Josh, about the Essex Junction situation specifically. And the concern about lawsuits. Well, I think what we've drafted here would preclude that, though, because the very first thing that we wanted to do was to clarify the intent that we think that the court missed when it made that decision back in May, to say that if you're a farm, like, and now I'm thinking not tier 1 specifically, but if you're a farm, then, the town can't regulate you. So I think the way that this would be written right now, the law would be clear, but it would be clear that you could have your ducks back, basically.
it would undo
Yeah.
what the city of Essex Junction has for zoning bylaws, assuming they still remained a farm under the agency of ag, under the existing wraps, which don't kick with the $2,000 limit and all the things correct. So it would bring that back forward and
So a couple more questions, and then did you have any more that you
That
wanted?
was all we
That was
wanted
all,
to
okay.
cover. Yeah,
So
thank you.
Representative Nelson and then Representative Burt.
So if a Essex Junction and Colchester don't opt into tier one B,
Yep.
do they automatically become tier two or they just stay?
tier two.
So the road rule will be in effect.
Yeah, road rules in effect everywhere.
Unless it's delayed this session,
Yeah.
which
we
we're
support.
advocating for.
Yeah,
But also it would mean that the town would not be able to regulate farming.
correct.
And they wouldn't have the exemptions for more housing from Act 250,
And they would lose
Yeah.
many state incentives through the designated program.
which I'm not sure everyone
Which is
is.
fine, that's their authority and we
That's their
support
authority, yeah.
their use of that authority. Yeah, but that's why, but you see how we're sort of back to where we started VLCT. In the vast majority of the state, we don't care. We don't want to regulate farming. We want farms to continue and to prosper and to make decisions according to how they want to grow.
And
their
have the
business.
experts regulate them, and
Yeah.
advise them.
Yeah.
It's not a municipality.
But in a place that is ambitious for growth, that has mandated housing targets, where the state has required 20 units of housing per acre. Like in, like in Milton, 20 units of acre per housing required. Whether Milton wants it or doesn't want it. And then if Milton says, okay, we also want 1B. And we're also gonna draw down downtown tax credits and we're gonna use CHIP and we're gonna build the housing that the state is asking us to build. Then we say there, let's make sure that the farming is working with what is happening in Milton for the future. That's what we're trying to get at through our legislative proposal.
But if the farm is there.
We agree, protect it, yeah.
It's protected,
Yeah.
they can run their trucks at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Because you gotta get the crops in. Thank you for that.
That would be the putting in that first area with the exception for existing farms as of July 1.
Yeah,
Would do that.
By the way, Mayor Buford Chase is, he's gonna make Newport dark pink or whatever color that is.
yeah,
You know,
that's,
cause that
yeah,
is gonna be our
Yep.
dense area,
You need
once
it.
we
You need
fix
the
the
pit
hole.
fixed and,
yep.
Okay.
I thought there was one more
Yeah,
question. no?
Representative Burt, yeah.
Yeah, so just looking for a little more clarity. So are you suggesting 1B areas would, if July's an existing farm now or as of July, whenever
Yeah.
you implemented, then you could continue to practice farming without coming under municipal bylaw. Is that correct?
Correct.
But in 1A,
Both 1A and 1B.
1A
Yep.
and 1B.
Yeah,
And what would be the process for figuring out who was an existing farm before?
I would love to maybe confer with Ledge Council, and also the agency. I think what you have drafted might be ripe for lawsuit depending on the activity the farm decides to do. Because remember, you have like construction, improvement. Whenever you get specific, you're leaving things out. And so then if the farm goes to do that, is someone gonna say, that's not construction, right? So I think, I'm not a lawyer and appreciate the input of the lawyers, but want to suggest it would say farms designated or farms subject to required agricultural practices prior to July 1, 2026 shall not be regulated by municipal bylaw.
Then it
So
would cover
basically-
anything they do.
Yeah, whatever they
Like it
do.
is now, rather than
Yeah.
trying to define just rehabbing a structure. Oh, we're building a new structure. It all
Yeah.
burned down. There wasn't a structure. If it's a farm regulated by RAP in these new 1A and 1B areas prior to this date, then they're exempt from this new municipal regulation.
Mhm.
We think is the is the smoothest compromise to get us to a place that recognizes, like you've been operating here, these new rules are gonna apply through no fault of your own, but there was this court case and there's development coming here.
Yeah.
Let's protect you. But in the future, a new farm moves in, you should probably know how to get the right permits and work with your dense neighbors, because there is gonna be constraints here. We wish the same issue would have been applied to the 3-acre rule, frankly, for all of our residents and neighbors, because that's going back 30, 40 years and
Yeah.
suggesting go fix something that you had no clue was gonna come law 30 years after you bought this home. And so
Yeah.
to prevent that scenario from happening,
Yeah.
we're recognizing that there are some things in place that to force them into new regulation today could create problems.
Yeah,
Yeah, one more follow-up question. There's also concern that with having this stipulation to put 20 units per acre
Yeah.
on tier 1A. What do we have in place in Act 181 or Act 250 or potential rules coming out from LERB to make sure that this idea of the right to grow food is great, but if
Mhm.
there's no land to grow it on in tier 1A, to making sure that there is land preserved for those people that live there to do that.
Mhm.
Are there any stipulations of, if we put up a whole bunch of apartment complexes, but a person has to go a mile away in order to plant something now?
Yeah.
Is there any provisions to say we want to carve out X amount of area to leave as open ground for food security for those individuals who live in the tier 1?
So, Act 250 and the tiered exemption exists in Title 10. What's weird about that is it's not where municipal planning exists, which is Title 24, what we're talking about today. When Act 181 creates the LERB and tells it to decide if this can be 1A or 1B, it tells it to look at a bunch of things. One of the things is a mix of uses. So public lands, places of civic importance, natural resources, etc. So I would say in sort of an obtuse way, it asks for that. It asks for the LERB and the Regional Planning Commission to know that there will be open public land available in this tier 1A area. It's not going to be all buildings. And we think that could be better. And we've talked to the farm groups about that, and there are states that have certainly superior direction to the planners. Remember, sometimes the planner is a town official, a volunteer, or an employee. Most of the time, it's a regional official that doesn't work for us. And so we agree that that instruction for including considerations of where people can grow food and safely manage animals that they own and keep, and enjoy things like community gardens, like Granville has many fruit trees planted on its town green. It would also be great to see more people living close enough to walk there and enjoy the fruit trees, right? That's part of the smart growth planning that we're looking for. And we agree maybe there's something to do. It wouldn't be in this bylaw section. It would be in this other elements of a municipal plan section. But hopefully we could work on something like what other states have that provide for that.
I think a real opportunity is as ANR works on more floodplain regulations, river corridor regulations. Every time we have these floods, there's buyouts in these areas. No one's going back to live there. Are we ensuring that these floodplains are now available for agriculture? Because that's a compatible use with areas that flood, as long as you don't obstruct. Like there could be positive to some smart growth here where we're backing out of these areas that we historically settled 100, 200 years ago, but flood all the time in exchange for moving our population into safer areas and now opening up this floodplain for compatible uses such as agriculture. I think our municipalities would be interested in that.
Yeah.
But this isn't the place to do it. I think that's a bigger discussion
Yeah.
as we talk about 20, 30 by 30, 50 by 50.
It's a good time to do it too,
Act 181, yes.
because everyone's planning. now.
John, just, thank you for trying to wrap it up. Just the grandfathering question that you were just addressing a moment ago with your thought. Would that still leave the individual in Essex who was subject to the RAPS a farm?
If they're currently subject to the RAPS as of the date effective of the law.
Okay.
If you make the change we're suggesting
Okay.
to use the RAP.
So timing would be
Yeah,
important there.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You may also want to say upon passage,
Yeah.
because Rutland County might be adopted before July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Graham, I know you are here this morning and maybe not this afternoon.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long our discussion will continue today. So if you'd like to come up and add your input, that would be great.
Thank you.
And Steve, thank you for being patient. Are we all, committee, we're all ready here to focus on our next witness? Graham, do you want to post anything?
I would love to.
Okay, can we just grab that sharing? Yeah.
Would I be able to do that now?
Should be able to, but there's, sometimes it needs like a double.
See what I can do.
Should we take a short break?